Okay, well, welcome everybody. And here we go. Consciousness and primordial wisdom. So this is a huge topic. I mean, those two things cover everything. Most of everything we know is consciousness. What we're heading for, Buddhahood, that's primordial wisdom. So between consciousness and primordial wisdom, we have a huge topic. And of course, today we're just going to touch on it. So let's start in the very, very, very best way and zoom out. It's a Zoom meeting, so let's zoom out. Let's remember we've had many, many lives, and we've got many lives to come. And when we learn more about consciousness, we realize that we are not a fixed self. We're a stream of consciousness, a story. And that story will be your story, will you feel like you for a long, long time. You'll never be somebody else until you are very liberated and your mind is released into the ocean of everything. So in this story that we are, just now you've been born in this body with your parents and family in this world of ours at this time in history. So we zoom out to the bigger picture. And here, when we study Dharma together, when we practice Dharma together, then we remember we're on our way to a mind which is peaceful, at peace with everyone, at peace with everything. We're at peace with ourselves. And we're heading towards a mind which is so clear, so wise. It's of benefit to everybody, and it will benefit anybody, because that wise mind is also a mind full of the most unconditioned, limitless love and compassion. We call it Buddha. So let's treasure today's teaching. Treasure the fact that we are precious human beings. We're alive. We have some free time to practice Dharma, some. And in our lives, we've met the Dharma, authentic Dharma. We've met teachers. We are very blessed. Something in us is ready to receive, and something out there is giving to us. And when these two come together, that is the most wonderful, beautiful thing that can happen to any human being. And we are those fortunate human beings. No one knows how long it will last, but right now, that's the truth of it. And so in this session, we're going to be making the karma of studying Dharma. Let's do it with the deepest, heartfelt, loving care for all beings, wanting ourselves to become pure and peaceful and brilliant with the light of wisdom, so that we can benefit all our fellow beings in the depths of their sufferings. And I'll do a few Tibetan prayers. Sonje chodon soje chonom la yancho badun danye chasanchi. Tagi jinso jipe sanam jin. Grola penchera sanje druparan shuvo. Semchan tamche dewa dang dewe jodang den paran jochi. Dukma dang dukma ji jodang kralawaran jochi. Dungal mepe dewa dampa dam men shalvaran jochi. Yerin chadan netan shalwe. Tanyong Chempo La Neparan Chochi. Olen Sawe Lama Rinpoche Dagye Chewara Pende Tenshula. Kadrin Chempo Gone Jezonte Ko Son Toche Majo Samato. So Thank you. Now this topic is wonderful. And so without further ado, what are we doing? I hope you got, or it doesn't matter if you didn't have time to download it or printing, but the backup material for the course. And in there you have the text of the third Karmapa. And the Jawa Karmapa, we say. Jawa means the one who embodies the teachings of all the Buddhas here on planet Earth for us. And that text has about 36 verses. We won't be studying it in a traditional study sense. We don't have the time. And the content of it is very, very dense. So once you start unpacking it, you need days, maybe weeks. And especially the first verses, they touch on very deep, very complex Madhyamaka philosophy. I did a series of courses once. I was interpreting for a Lama, where we did 4 months to get our heads around that. People were studying quite hard, and we did exams at the end to see how much had gone in, and some had gone in, some had gone in. But even after 4 months, these are very profound, amazing notions. So we will be, what I'll be doing is giving you the essence, I hope, of information that will help you spend quality time with that text. And sometimes we'll go to the text specifically, and sometimes I'll just give a very brief overview of the topics that it's pointing us to. Now, because that is the inspiration behind these teachings, and many of our Kagyu Lamas have given courses, and there are some books like Trungpa Rinpoche about what is consciousness and what is primordial wisdom, and how does the one fit with the other. In the translations, they talk about the transformation of consciousness into wisdom. Yeah, well, we'll get there and try and understand, but it's not quite like that. But it's easier for us if we understand that this consciousness that we are can become the wisdom of the Buddha. So the third Karmapa's text is a key reference for all of our understanding. And normally before we go into a text, even though we're not going to into it in detail, nevertheless, it is standard procedure to talk about the qualities of the author. Now, of course, all of the 16 Karmapas, and now 17, all the 16 have been outstanding. But among the outstanding Karmapas, all of them, some of them stand out even more than the others. So within the first 16, there are, let's say, 3 or 4 very, very famous ones. Of course, the first Karmapa, because that was the coming officially of the Karmapa onto our world stage. Jusum Chenpa studied under Gampopa and was huge in the history of Tibetan Buddhism. And then the second Karmapa was magnificent through his power and presence and his influence. And there we see a Karmapa with a world stage influence. His influence on China, on Mongolia, on the Himalayan kingdoms, and the actual power he manifested. It was said to be the most powerful of the Karmapas. Now, in a way, because he was the second Karmapa, you could say that he was the first reincarnation of the Karmapa, because in Tibetan history, the Karmapas are famous as being the first reincarnate lamas. Before in India, although from time to time one lama was seen as, oh yes, he's the reincarnation of so-and-so, either in recent history or way back. It wasn't a systematic being reborn in the same place, the same family of people again and again. So in one way, we could say the second Karmapa was the first Tulku, or reincarnate Dharma of Tibet. That's true. But actually, when we look more technically, the third Karmapa was the first real Tulku, because he'd not just come back once, as many teachers had done, but he'd come back systematically, and then with this procedure that happened with the Karmapa, where before they die, they leave a very clear indication of where they'll be reborn. So the third Karmapa was the first Karmapa Tulku, the first real reincarnate Lama of Tibet. But where he's famous is because he had received through the lineage what what Mapa had got from his two main gurus, Naropa and Maitrapa. From Maitrapa, the Mahamudra teachings, from Naropa, all the yogic teachings, the 6 yogas, and all the complexity of visualized Tantra, that came to Mapa. He gave that to Milarepa. And up to Milarepa, it was very, very localized. Amazing teachers with a handful of disciples. Milarepa gave that to Gampopa. And with Gampopa, already we get this Kaju lineage, as Naropa predicted. He said, it will go from strength to strength, like the children, like the offspring of snow lions or Garudas, meaning the children, the next generation, get stronger than the previous generation. So Gampopa, into Milarepa's teachings, integrated two things. All the Bodhisattva teachings, of which he was a great master, because he was a 10th level Bodhisattva. He had a huge karmic history, dharmic history of that. And then he brought in the purity of monasticism. So whereas Milarepa had 25 main disciples, and then many lay disciples who saw him occasionally, Gampopa in his life taught 50,000 people, and the first Kaju monasteries, and then the full establishment of bodhicitta as the basis for our Kaju lineage, Mahamudra. And then this was handed down through the first, second Karmapa, and the lamas in between. But what happens with the third Karmapa is that he then integrated some marvelous other lineages. Dzogchen, he became a great Dzogchen master, so the Nyingmapa teachings from Guru Rinpoche were integrated. He integrated the Chö teachings from Gampa Songje, so the Chö practice, which is such a wonderful practice. That lineage became part of our Kaju lineage. He was a master of medicine and astrology, and also he integrated the Kala Chakra lineage with all of its teachings about us, the microcosm, and our relation with the macrocosm all around us, and in particular, the meaning of our chakras and channels and all of that. So he not only integrated those lineages, he studied very widely and wisely. And also he practiced extensively, so he mastered the content of all of those. So he enriched our Kaju lineage greatly. And this particular text about consciousness and wisdom shows us very much what our mind is. So I'd like now to go to the text, and let's look at one of the verses. So first verse is very simple. Homage to all the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas. And as we go along, I'll give you the transmission of this as well. Namshi yeshi je pitencha shruso. Sonje dan janchup sempatam chela chat salo. Nearly all the teaching texts start with a homage. There's a kind of code to it. There are three main types of homage that show you whether we are dealing with sutra or something else. So we won't go into that. But the main reason for the homage is for the teacher to show that they are passing on the timeless knowledge of the Buddhas. They're not just making up some bright idea of, hi there, I'm the third Karmapa, and this is my brilliant thinking, brand new on the block. No, they say, this is the Buddha's teaching. This is the teaching of all the Bodhisattvas. They say, so we have to listen, that this is done in order to help themselves be more humble. Whether or not the third Karmapa needed to be a bit more humble, I have no idea. Excuse me, I just dropped my paper. That's my morning gymnastics for a 73-year-old, picking up a sheet of paper. So anyway, but they're setting us the example of always, when it comes to Dharma, referring to the great teachers and the Buddha as our example, and being very careful not to make it up ourselves. And then he carries on to show in the second verse what we call the commitment. So very often the second verse of a text is the author's commitment to write. They're explaining or they're referring to their motivation. And so he says this: I gained a thorough understanding through hearing the teachings, 1, contemplating their meaning, 2, and then 3, meditation, remaining in retreat, so as to engage in the process of meditation. Now, meditation, the word that's translated here is gom. And gom, although we translate it as meditation, it means becoming familiar. It means whatever you've studied, whatever you've thought about in depth, now you need to become that. Become so familiar that it's not something you know. You're inseparable from it. You've become it. It's the way you think, the way you feel, it's the way you see life, it's the way you are integrated with the Buddha's blessing and presence. So gom, which we translate as meditation, doesn't just mean sitting on your butt in the posture and doing some kind of practice. It means bringing the Buddha's teaching from out there into yourself until you've become it. It becomes your default state. And he says, I shall describe here the kind of realization that arose during that time of gom, of integration, of retreat. Let me give you the transmission for that. Te dansamla raptene kompitsulla jovicia, danne wimpara dupana, suldinawa joparaja. So that's the second verse. Now, he said that he did 3 things. And sort of, what does that mean? It means you ought to be doing these 3 things too. He's not bragging and he's not sharing his history. He's saying this is the way to do it. And it certainly is. The first is called study. And that means acquiring the knowledge or acquiring the technique if it's meditation. It's out there. At first, it's a mystery. We have to wrap our heads around it. We have to attend teachings. And we have to make sure, and this is the main part about what we call study, which very interestingly was, in this case, in Tibetan, it's te. Te means to listen, because in many Buddhist countries, people were illiterate Of course, they didn't have Wikipedia and internet, but they didn't have books a lot of the time. And certainly in the first few centuries after Buddha, everything that was valuable was learned by heart. It wasn't knowledge out there. It's something you took into you, at least in words that were very clear for you. And I know some of my own teachers, like Khenpo Sotim Gyaltsab, spent all their spare time rehearsing the things they'd learned by heart so as not to forget them. And the amount that they could remember was amazing. So ter means to listen, and it doesn't just mean listen, it means to listen well, to really heed what's being said, to be very, very open and receptive, excuse me. So that while you're receiving the teachings, you're 100% there, and you're really trying to get it. So study means you get the information or the technique very clearly, and you make sure you've got it straight and that it's understood with your noddle, with your intellect. You've got it clear. The second stage is reflection. And this is something, if I may share with you, from my own experience. Of course, the way it seems to me, I can't say that's it 100% definitely, absolutely, and absolute truth. But the way it seems to me is that I've met, what can you say, successful Buddhists and not quite so successful Buddhists. And the successful ones who go on from study to this second step of reflection. It means you have to do what I call deep think. You have to spend time with what you've been taught to try and work out some very, very wise or compassionate being, a teacher, understood this. And you know the way understanding works. I think we've probably all met this. You understand, but then something clicks and you understand on a deeper level, and then on an even deeper level, and your mouth can't express it because words don't express it. It's just you've suddenly seen the truth on a much wider, deeper level. And that goes on and on and on. So a teacher who has deep understanding has told you ideas and notions which you understood intellectually in your own terms at the time. Now we could spend our whole life doing that, and some Buddhists do. They go from teaching to teaching to teaching, from teacher to teacher to teacher, and it's nice, it's very good. They make good karmic connections for future lives, and there's a blessing in what they do. And the fact that the volumes coming in again and again will certainly help erode some of our habits, but not that much. What my main teachers have told me, and what I'd like to tell you, is that it is much better to stay with fewer teachings and to explore them, to savor them, to sit with them as your best friends, to try and feel what's really going on here. What would my teacher who taught me this like me to understand in the depths of my being from this? So that's reflection. And we throw things into question. We don't just accept ideas. We really try to, it's not a very nice term in English, but be the devil's advocate. We say, is this really true? Is this true in terms of my own experience? Have I seen life like this or not? And so on. And that should stir things up a bit, bring up questions. And those questions need answers. So this stage of reflection is very, very important, because in it you should remove anything in you which is not comfortable with the teachings. Now, there are two reasons why you might not be comfortable. One is that your ego is getting in the way. and the teachings are rubbing your ego up the wrong way. And you just, maybe, or maybe that's true for some people, you can. And, or one bit of you inside is reluctantly thinking, yeah, this is true, but yeah, maybe later, or whatever it is. So sometimes you're uncomfortable because of your ego, but sometimes you're rightly uncomfortable because the Buddha's teachings are so varied and they address different people at different stages in their development. So maybe you've come across something which is perfect for somebody else at the stage they're at, but it's not right for you just now where you're at. Sometimes we're too ambitious. People go for very highfalutin teachings. Their intellect likes that. Anyway, doesn't matter. Sometimes the reasons you are uncomfortable is because this isn't the right teaching, or sometimes not the right teacher for you. An excellent teacher, an excellent teaching. And going for the best is good. It's like if you have a headache and you need a paracetamol, and you go into the pharmacy and you say, what's the most expensive medicine you've got? And they'd say, oh, what if we've got this anti-cancer drug? I suppose that's about, $10,000 a dose. I said, well, it must be the best if it's that expensive. They give me that for the headache. Sometimes what's best for us is so simple. So simple. So anyway, sometimes we're uncomfortable. And the purpose of reflection is to take us deeper and deeper and deeper into the meaning of the teaching, and to bring up anything in our karma, in our understanding, in our own wisdom development, which is at odds with the Buddha's teaching, so as to get rid of it. In another one of his prayers, if those come up, it gives us such an excellent verse about that. No time today. But then, as that process of reflection and deep thinking becomes stronger, then automatically it opens doors, and gone, this familiarity with the truth gets deeper and deeper. Now, sometimes we can, as the Karmapa did, go into retreat, so that all day long we are allowing the teachings to come into us, to permeate us, this osmosis between ourselves and Buddha mind. But whatever it is, what's called Gom, or translated as meditation, is not a different step from study and then taking the study deeper, where you sit in a posture and do things. Of course, we do that. But the actual meaning of Gom is that what we've acquired from the outside and thought about deeply becomes real and couldn't become anything else. So the third Karmapa says he's done that. Now, he's going to tell us in this text about two things: consciousness, which in Sanskrit is vijnana, and primordial wisdom, which in Sanskrit is jhana. And now here we have, it's not really a problem, but we have a situation. It's my clock that makes bird noises. It reminds me I'm halfway through already. I barely started. Oh dear. Anyway. Finished? Yeah. Okay. So the Sanskrit is very well organized linguistically. There are 4, 5, 6 words, all hinged around one syllable, which is ja, which is I don't know if you can see ja, to know. It looks like it's J-N-A, jna. And around ja, which is knowing in a very raw sense, it's just, not even you know something is known. The mind is clear about it. Ja. So that syllable becomes the basis, the axis, and we add other things to it to make different types of knowing. Sanskrit does that, and the Tibetan replicates that. So the ja in Tibetan is she. So we get she rab, yes she. Lots of words with she, shepa, duche, dushi, and so on. So the Tibetan replicates the Sanskrit with these technical terms, and they're very, very clearly defined in their meaning. Whereas when we come to English, and somehow the early translators, bless them, gave us various translations which are stuck. So we've got a sort of terms like consciousness, awareness, cognition, primordial awareness, and so on. So how does it work? Let's not spend too much time, but it is important here. So consciousness, in the technical sense, in the Abhidharma, in the Buddhist teaching, throughout all the traditions of Buddhism, is vijja, na. Forget the na, that's just grammar. So vijja. The V means specific. So the knowing here means what's showing on the screen of your mind. What is known to your mind, what is making itself known to your mind is ja. Vijja means something specific is being known to your mind. And when we study vijnana, consciousness, we see how actually each second, because we're in a human body with our five senses and so on, then we can only really do one thing at a time, intently. You can either see or hear or smell or taste or have sensations with your body, eat, cold, what your nerves bring to your brain. You can only really do one of them fully at a time. And all the others are there, but they become background, peripheral. So vijja means in this moment, you are zoomed in on that. It may be something you see. You may be looking at a landscape or a flower. It may be words you hear that you're listening to, concentrating on the meaning. It may be that you're freezing cold and that you're shivering, and that occupies. So one thing that becomes known in the moment and then becomes central to that moment is what that moment's about. And just now, although you're looking at me and seeing me, if you could get into your consciousness, or these days we'd say the brain, they overlap a lot. We are actually time sharing, listen, look, listen, look, listen, look. So the signals coming to the brain are processed so fast, it seems like a continuum. But you know, sometimes we can be more listening and we're not really looking so much. And sometimes we can be more looking and then we don't quite listen so much to the meaning. It shows us in some ways how it works. So we've got vijja or vijnana means to know something, specific knowing. And then we get another word, the next one, which is prajna, prajna, pragana. There are many ways to say it. I say pranja, which we translate as wisdom. Now the pra that goes with the ja means excellent or the best, supreme. So the best, what is being known to yourself. So this is when not only is there something on screen through consciousness, but it is known truly for what it is. there is the truth. It's our knowing is authentic knowing. It's the best you could get. Supreme, pra. So that's pranja, pragana, pranja. And in Tibetan, that's sherab. And then we get jhana. It's the same ja, but now it's got the na afterwards to make it a substantive. And that is the one which we call primordial wisdom. And in the Tibetan translation, yeshe, they make that clearer because the ye means since forever, since time without time, always been there. So it's knowing what was always there. And this particular term, jhana, yeshe, only applies to knowledge of the absolute truth of Buddha mind, Buddha nature, shunyata. It doesn't apply to relative knowledge where the vijnana is focused on something. It's not about that kind of knowing something as best we can. It's about being that one with the timeless, primordial, totally pure nature that is the truth of ourselves. So in this text, now I hope that helps us understand that we are comparing, where are we? Here. Vijnana, consciousness, with jhana, primordial wisdom. That's what the Karmapa's text is about. Now, we could study these, and it would be a beautiful Abhidharma study, and we could go into lots of detail as we don't have the time. I've given 10-day courses in Samiling about this in more detail. But what I want in this course for you is not that you are studying something and becoming learned. I want this teachings to help you become more aware, more conscious of who you are. One thing, who you are just now. And then through our study of consciousness, why you are, who you are just now, and why you are experiencing the people, the events, the time in history, planet Earth, that you are experiencing in the way you're experiencing it just now. These are very real questions. It's not academic about studying such and such a Buddhist school who thought this, and another Buddhist school who thought that, and a non-Buddhist who thought that. There is an awful lot, acres and acres of teachings and Buddhist studies about schools and traditions and their views of reality. And these are touched on by the Karmapa in the next few verses. Rather, what we do. Now, this is important because, we don't have time. I think everyone here, you are not monastics. You don't have your whole day to practice. You're not in retreat. So if you don't have much time, then what is vital is to go to the essential point. So your time is used to the full. And the way we do this in our tradition, in whatever meditation time we have, we use it efficiently, and we try to, more than anything else, understand what is this mind of mind. So we explore our consciousness stream. Now, this stream of vijnana, of consciousness, has two qualities, more, but two very specific ones. One is that it never stops. And the second one is that it's always changing through causes and conditions. It's a story of karma that never stops. It's like a river of consciousness. So we call it a stream. It's non-stop, and it is very relative in the sense that who you are, your consciousness stream, your movie, what's on your screen moment after moment is unique to you through past causes and conditions that we call karma of body, speech, mind. So there is this stream of consciousness that you are, and until you come to Buddhist meditation practice, it is 100%, as far as you're concerned, what you are. But in these teachings, we see that parallel to vijnana, there is another thing running. So two parallel realities, and that is we call your Buddha nature. That is not changing all the time. It is changeless. And every moment in your thousands of previous existences, and just now, and in all your future existences, that will be there, Buddha mind, the truth of you, and it will never change. The vijnana, the consciousness stream, is always impure. Even when you're doing something beautifully pure, let's imagine that with the most kind heart, you are practicing generosity and helping other people in some ways. Your motivation is wonderful, wonderful. Your action is immaculate, and you are really beneficial. So we call that virtue. But it's still called, and here's another translator's thing, tainted. It's virtue, but the mind is tainted by duality, because there's a feeling inevitable, because we're not liberated yet, of me, the doer, and out there some other that's a receiver, and an interaction. We call that triplicity: doer, receiver, interaction. So that is the taint, even in virtuous karma, whereby we do good for others and good for ourselves, and we progress along the path, of course. But nevertheless, it's called tainted. So consciousness is always tainted by duality, or when subject-object. And when subject-object interaction, we call it triplicity. Consciousness is always tainted. So because of that taint, then we will be reborn. If you wonder why you've been reborn, why you're in this body, it's because you are still subject to tainted karma, be it good karma or bad karma, through your mind still being rooted in a dualistic reflex, a habit that goes back beyond anything anyone can remember. So parallel to that, jhana, or primordial wisdom, is non-dual. It's unchanging, and it does not depend on anything. We say it was never born, never arose, was never born, so it can never die. It never arose out of nowhere with the idea of creation. It never was created by something or arose from something else. Hard to get our head around, because normally we work in a notion of time, past, present, future, chickens and eggs, something came from something else. We can't, until we experience it, really get our heart around the idea of timeless and always has been, always will be. But jhana, primordial wisdom, the primordial nature, has always, will always be. It depends on nothing, whereas our consciousness depends through causes and conditions. So what we'll see, maybe today, maybe next week, is how when we explore consciousness, it has three aspects to it And if some of you were with me when I gave the 2 talks to the African Dharma Center in Ikopo, then you'll know we explored it in a little bit more depth, these 3 facets of our consciousness. One, in terms of this knowing, what is being made known to you in this moment is what is put on our screen by karma. And it's usually experienced in a way as what feels other to you as an aware mind, as an intelligence. So we are knowing other people talking to us, other people acting in a certain way towards us. We are knowing the world around us with its life, with its politics, with its climate and everything. It's the movie that's on your screen, and in the way it's on your screen, it's not in anybody else's screen like that. Beside which we could never check it out. We can't pop inside each other's heads to see what it's like, even for somebody we know so very, very, very well. So what is actually happening to you in this moment? We can take it a little bit deeper. It's not just coming in from out there. It's also what you, the intelligence or the knower, are aware of when you explore your mind, your memories, your thoughts about this or that. Somehow it's something you are thinking about. It comes up. So whatever comes up and is on your screen in this second is called the dependent aspect of your mind. Depends on your past karma of body, speech, or mind. Now, we can't do very much about that. We can do something, but so much of it is beyond our control. Or if we can do something about it, it's a long-term job. So in the other talks, I compared that to turning around a big ship in the ocean. It's not like a rally car where you can pull up the handbrake and twist the wheel and you're facing the other direction in half a second. Turning around a big ship takes time. So if you've got whatever karma it is, wealth karma, poverty karma, health karma, sickness karma, being in an unfortunate place karma, or being in a fortunate place karma, family karma, like this, like that, that is slow to turn around. That's aspect 1. It depends on your karma, the dependent. Right now, your karma's got you in front of the screen with Ken Holmes talking to you. But then second aspect is called interpretation. Let's call it today interpretation. It's very hard. It means, in Tibetan, kunta, tak means it's labeled, interpreted, translated. Kun means totally. It's totally your interpretation in the moment of what's happening to you through karma. Now that we can change. We can change. And we can change it if we practice intensely and wisely and intelligently and from the heart. We can change it as quickly as it can be changed. So although we still have the wealth or the poverty, although we still have the family that we've got, or in the health or sickness we've got, so on, the way we relate to it, the way we tell the story of it, what it means for us as a blessing or a curse, and so on. There is where so much of the Buddha's teachings and methods, bodhisattva methods, help us enormously. Now, those 2 things, instead of 3 aspects, if we put it that way, to this moment, are to do with our karma. what's on your screen just now and how you are relating to it. The third aspect is the truth of the matter. Who you really are, what you really are, that never changes. So all the time we're going through experiencing our karma and relating to it in a helpful or not so helpful way. All the time there is this true nature of the mind which is experiencing those things. And so today, because time goes by so quickly, let's look at consciousness, how the Buddha presented it, and somewhere in your documentation you've got a kind of a map which I had fun making quite some years ago. Find it. Yes. This one. So it's about 6 consciousnesses. And the Buddha taught 6. All the Buddhist schools refer to these 6. It's a universal through Theravada, through Tibetan Buddhism, then it's always 6 consciousnesses. Somebody's got their microphone on. We just coughed. Okay. So please turn off. Then we have the 5 sense consciousnesses. This is a fascinating topic. You know, we are human. We are human. We were born as an embryo, and then as a cell and an embryo, and we grew up. We were born, we grew up. So this mind of yours just now is incredibly conditioned by what these eyes of yours have seen, by what these ears of yours have heard, what this nose has smelt, the tongue has tasted, and the sensations your body has felt. That's, unless you have past life memory or you have a more panoramic, more cosmic awareness, that very localized human way. You know, it's not the way butterflies experience things. It's very human, has very much solidified our own story of everything. So the 5 senses are enormous, and when we have the time, we explore our visual history, our hearing history, learning to understand words and ideas and so on. So of the 6 consciousnesses, now the word vijnana, conscious, it doesn't mean, because the word conscious in English has so many resonances. It can mean to be aware. We talk of cosmic consciousness, you know. It's a loose term. In the 6 consciousnesses, it is incredibly precise. It is merely technical. The basic teachings of the Buddha are based on a model of reality where there is mind and matter, because that's the way life presents itself to us generally. So we are an intelligence experiencing a material universe made of atoms and particles and so on. So the word consciousness means that something is brought to our knowing by visual consciousness. So when our power to see, which we have as humans, links up with something to be seen, a color or a shape, and that's it. So in this moment, if you make a point of looking at your screen and look at one, maybe just one area of your screen, one color, then in this moment, I'm looking at the picture of Akon Rinpoche above my head, and the green plant is holding, and I'm focusing on the green. green colors and shape messages are coming to my awareness because this eye has looked at those atoms that are out there. So power to see, power to be seen in the material world. And when of all the things we could do, like listen to sounds or think about something, we are visual, then boing, this connection. And that's what consciousness is, vijnana, the connection between subject and object. So green plant, boing. And if I make a sound, now power to hear connects with the presence that can be heard, which we call a sound. Then when power to hear connects with the power to be heard, then that connection, simply that, technically that, how vividly aware of it or not you are, whatever labels you put on it or not, doesn't matter. Just that connection with the ear and sound is called hearing consciousness. All the rest, and you'll see that in your diagram, is called, oops, better if it's the right way up. Where's my hand? There. Like looking in the mirror. Mental events. These are called sanskaras. So when you hear that sound and you think, gong, Tibetan gong, maybe you know because you bought some or you've been trading in gongs, the exact name of that gong, and you know that's a 6-inch, whatever it is, so on, so on, so on. All that kind of recognition is something else. That's not consciousness. We are not conscious of things in that sense. All the knowing it's a gong and all the rest of it comes later, split seconds later. Just the connection of ear with sound, eye with a visible, the nose with a smell, something that can be smelled, an odor, the tongue with something which has taste, and our nerves with something that can provoke nervous sensations to our body, texture, rough, smooth, hot, cold, and so on. Simply that connection is called consciousness. So our 5 senses are bringing us in messages all the time. 5 sense consciousnesses. And so there's a question there. What does it mean when we say the power, the ability to be seen? Something that many things are not visible for us humans. They may be visible for other animals. So in our human experience, some things have the power or the ability to be seen. And our eyes have the ability to see certain things we can't see, very small, and so on. So when those two join up, then it's consciousness. Now, that's the 5 senses. And when teaching consciousness, then often our teachers come to the 6th consciousness, which is mental consciousness, which is actually what makes the 5 senses work. You see, the messages are coming in through seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. But whether they actually present themselves to our mind with any consequence depends on the mental consciousness. So sometimes this is shown like a monkey going around a room with 5 windows. Sometimes our mental consciousness is more working with the seeing window or the hearing window or the smelling or the tasting or touching window. If you're a wine taster, then you're like this. Your mind is very, very aware of your taste buds. If you're listening to a piece of music you've just recorded, your mind is very, very much with your hearing. So mind is like the part of the forearm, receiving messages from the 5 sense consciousnesses so that we become mentally conscious. But then if we take the forearm, we can take this part, which is we can call central consciousness, chitta. A mind can not just be aware of the five senses, but it can be aware of itself, of thoughts, of memories, things which are mental and not coming in through your five sense doorways. So when we study these six consciousnesses in practice, in meditation, we become aware of, we just let our mind run its normal way, don't interfere. And sometimes this is a visual consciousness moment. Sometimes this is a remembering something moment. Sometimes this is an ideas moment of investigating ideas and thoughts. We watch our central consciousness, chitta, going through habit from one of the five senses or to mind's own inner mental event activity of thinking and labeling. And then when we practice and we sit and explore mind, we see in more detail in split seconds how buoying we have a visual consciousness. So if I look at my photo above me again, there, then first it's just shapes and colors, which is all our visual consciousness can process, shapes and colors. But then immediately, mind's mental events, put a name, put a label. So I say that I know Akon Rinpoche, I recognize in a way because I've known before. I recognize. That's Akon Rinpoche. And I might recognize the plant he is holding. So in one split second, after the visual consciousness, there will be the mind's mental consciousness accepting that as its main subject for this instant. And then around the mind, which is focused in that particular part of its story, then we can recognize, we can add labels, we can add names. And then based on that will come memories of plants, memories of Akon Rinpoche. And so we study the process of mind consciousness and of the five senses. So I have to conclude here, because time's gone by very quickly. It's just to introduce the fact that in the basic Buddha's teachings, there are six consciousnesses. And what we're going to go on to, and which is important for us in the next talk, are how in our Tibetan Buddhism and in Mahayana Buddhism, and especially in the Chittamatrin and the Yogacarya school, we talk of 8 consciousnesses. Now, it's not as though there are 2 new ones which are suddenly discovered. It's that this 6th consciousness is so funny working in a mirror. So this 6th consciousness, mental consciousness, has some functions which are so vital because they are going to determine who you become. They've determined who you are. In that 6th consciousness, mind and this peripheral mental events, there are 2 things which are so powerful that we extract them and we call them consciousness 7 and consciousness 8. The 7th one is called the defiling or the warping or the deforming consciousness, which gives duality, triplicity, and which sets up the programming of what comes next and what comes after that and what comes after that. It's our programming habits, and it's the habit of splitting every experience into 2. 7th consciousness, defining consciousness. Then the other aspect of mind, 6th consciousness, which is so important, is the way it stores things, even for hundreds of lifetimes. It's an invisible storage from which all our experience is drawn. It's all the story of you that's still carried and that's still potent and that can still give you the experiences you're having second after second and the way you relate to those experiences. If we could wipe that storage like wiping a hard disk, you would be a brand new, probably totally stupid being. You'd become wiped, washed. It wouldn't be the story of you anymore. It's not like that. When we try and work with who we are, it is laborious. It takes all the way to enlightenment, many lifetimes. So this holding, storing ability of mind is the eighth consciousness called Alaya, storehouse, Vijana, the Maya Vijana. Okay, well, thank you very much. I went over the time a little bit, but never mind. Let's conclude this part of the teaching with a dedication whereby we share whatever was useful with all of our fellow beings, as though they're part of us, part of our heart, part of who we are, part of why we're alive, especially with those who are close to us or who've been close to us for the better or for the worse. Our parents and our family, all those who figured prominently in our lives. We have karma with them. They are a vivid part of our own consciousness that we carry. And that consciousness we must liberate. And part of it is by sharing all that is healthy, all that is good with them from the depths of our being, wishing that somehow it will help them and everyone else we'll ever meet to attain a mind which is free, a mind which is peaceful, a mind which is clear, and a mind which is the very embodiment of unconditional love. Sonom dia tomche zikvani, topme nyepe janam pomche ne, Jekana je palab trupai, sipe sole drova drova. So that's the teaching part. We've got another 20 minutes or so if you want to stay here, and you can turn on your microphones. And if you've got anything you'd like to add or any questions you'd like to ask, then this is the moment. And so just let me change how you appear on my screen because I can only see a handful of you. You need to speak up if you are wanting to say something because that will activate. James,
could I ask a question, Ken? Could you just very briefly go over again the sixth consciousness in terms of how you described it? Because on the other five, you described how it's that connection between an object and our sight. Is the mental consciousness a connection between?
Same. It's a connection between you, the intelligence, you, the awareness, and what you are aware of. So not intelligent in the sense of thinking. It's just if you, like just now, you remember a room from your childhood. There's you remembering, and somehow in your mind field, there is this residual image, which is being remembered. So just like the eye can join up with a color, your intelligence can join up with a memory, can join up with a thought. And, you know, if I ask you, I say, what are you thinking about now? There's you thinking about something, the way it seems. So it's the connection. And sometimes that becomes vivid if you can't get out of a loop of thinking. your mind goes back to it again and again. You realize, I don't want to be thinking about this, but the mind brings it back. I don't want to be remembering these painful things, but the mind brings it back. So there is an experiencer, and there is an experience, and each time that they connect, and so that is your on-screen reality for the moment. That is mental consciousness.
And the so-called experiencer, be it a sight, sound, memory, that's the screen of our mind.
The end product is on the screen of your mind.
Yes. Yeah.
It feels like, because of seventh consciousness, there's an experiencer and there's something being experienced. So when we rationalize what goes on inside us, we say, I remembered this. It's called a mental event. It's a peripheral activity whereby we're telling the story of what's happening. But if through meditation we become more aware of what goes on, then we can't find those two sides. There is just, if you remember a room, in that moment in your mind, there's the image of a room. It's only when we rationalize it, we say, oh yeah, I remembered. That's where meditation gets interesting. We need to
So the screen is a bit of a mental formation, but it kind of helps get our head around it.
Yeah. It's what's happening in this moment. What's happening. You can call it a screen or whatever, but it's what's happening. This is why consciousness is so important to understand.
Yeah.
Life happens, whether we give it names and labels or not.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Ken. Can I ask a question, please?
Yes.
Thanks.
A second. I want to see if I can see you on screen. Who's speaking? I've got.
Hi, me. My name's Georgia.
Georgia. Hi, Georgia. Okay, carry on.
I'm wondering if you can say something about how I can work.
I can see you now. Yeah.
With my kind of very basic understanding with kind of the idea of lifetimes, because there's this voice in my head that tells me, oh, it's just a story to give meaning, to make the idea of death seem easier. I just can't kind of move past that idea.
Well, I think first we need to be clear that that is what the Buddha taught. And whether you agree with it, whether you can really think, of course, or yes, that's it, is another thing. But first we need to be clear, this is what the Buddha is teaching us. Not some people think the Buddha taught this and some other people think he didn't. That is the Buddha's teaching. First we need to get that clear. And then second, we think, well, if that's the Buddha's teaching, and somehow I can only really feel it like this, why might that be? So we're using our reason, our logic. Why might that be? Is it that it's just fairy tales or told to us to help us be more comfortable with this or that, which might be a human way of explaining it? Is it that it's quite iffy, in other words? Or is it that I have a resistance in myself to this, because if I take this on board, the implications are enormous. So normally when we come from a Western upbringing to Dharma, from a conditioning whereby we're used to thinking of one life, then we've organized our life, we've organized our thinking in those terms. It's like when you get to my age, you think, gosh, phew, made it. I finished working, you've got a pension or whatever it is, and all being well, fingers crossed, you can kind of hang on until the end. We think in terms of one life, and that's it. Whereas if the Buddha's teaching is true, we are a much longer term story. And then if we look at the context of that story, and this is where it's really interesting, where there is a moral implication. We're alive here. For why? What is the opportunity? What is the potential? What is the Buddha inviting us to develop? And it is this goodness of being. It is this harmony and unity with our fellow beings, whereby we live in service rather than we live in order to get through just one life and then it's over. We are alive with a potential to what? Through these teachings in the coming weeks, we'll see, to realize this jhana, this purity that is in all of us. So the implications are enormous. And sometimes we are quite understandably a bit frightened by that. And so we can think reasonably, logically, about whether it could be true and try to learn more about what it means to watch young children as they come into life and grow up. Are they just, is it nature or nurture? Are they just being the nurture that's given to them and being programmed 100% by their parents, in which case all siblings will be pretty much the same? Or do they come into this life with some inheritance from the past, which means that as they grow up, a very specific character will emerge, qualities will emerge, obstacles will emerge. And we just, in general, we try to understand better that reincarnation fits in a larger story of karma, cause and effect, and of what being human means in terms of an opportunity and potential. So I think my advice there would be just to sit very quietly and explore whether, when you think about the fact that you might come back and be born again and again, or the fact that you might be an ongoing story from past lives, try and actually feel where the unease is, and try to then become your own devil's advocate. And they have two chairs. You can actually have two chairs and sit in the usual chair, you. Then you can go and change to the other chair, which is facing it, and become you, the Buddhist, saying, now just imagine, you're going to be reborn and the potential you have. As much as you can. I think it might help. We can't prove reincarnation in the normal sense, in as much as we can't put some kind of radioactive marker on a person who's dying and then somewhere in a maternity ward come and check out to say this person was that. All I can tell you in my life, because I'm not young, is I've had friends, Buddhist friends, close friends, who've died, and in at least 2, 3, 4 cases, I've been very certain myself where they've been reborn. And it's glaringly obvious, because you see, even from quite early on, some of the old things, they're very different in one way, but deep inside, that can be quite striking. Reincarnate lamas, some of whom I've met when they're very young, and what they carry, they could never have got from their parents, and so on. So there are sort of ways of affirming the Buddhist view of reincarnation, but we can't prove it in kind of modern scientific terms for one very good reason. What is the whole history of our science has been the exploration of the material world. And consciousness is not material.
Mm.
Yeah, I hope that helps. Yes, Katie.
I just wanted to share a little bit with Georgia about 2 things. One is a direct experience of my son, who has very, very strong, what I could only describe as being past life experiences, which have been really interesting to hear from him. But secondary to that, I think we've grown up in a Western culture where our mind is very tightly constrained by ideas of, like Ken was saying, rationalizing all the time why something happens. So culturally, we haven't inherited faith or a willingness to be able to just let go to an idea unless it's proven. But for myself, I imagine my brain is a very tight muscle that's tightly conditioned by these senses that Ken's described today. And as I become better, and it's a slow process, but as I become better and more disciplined with meditation, the tightness of my brain and my ideas relaxes. And then it's as though this primordial awareness, I don't even know if this is correct to say, Ken, but there's more room for a different kind of awareness to come. And with it, slowly, my view of my own life and my beliefs as they have been relaxes. So I think it's the both things. It's taking meditation as a practice and learning and reflecting and looking at these ideas. And then the two things together slowly opens me to experiencing and comprehending or perceiving things differently. And it is difficult to let go when you've been conditioned in a rational Western way, I think, to an idea of something that can't possibly be proven. That's just my own personal experience to share. So
thank you very much. I can see messages coming in saying that's very helpful too. And it is this idea of more room. And it means that as we make more room, and as we get, as you just said, more relaxed, then we've got the highly conditioned way we've been as one thing, and the Buddhist explanation as another. And as we relax, we can just let them sort themselves out. And I think what will happen is the Buddhist one becomes more and more reasonable. I'd like to add two things to that because it's an interesting series of thoughts. One is that having a scientific training, I know that if you can't say for sure this is what's happening, then you have hypotheses. And you take the various hypotheses, the various models, and you see which one fits the facts best. Now, if you take the reincarnation model and a one life model, from all I've seen as scientific approach, the reincarnation model fits the facts of life much better. So that's a kind of scientific thing. The other thing is, and thank you, Katie, for what you said about your son and past life memories. Now, the University of Virginia has been doing for, I think 30 years now, research into children and past life memories. That's published, and there's so many past life recognitions, but they've also explored some stories very thoroughly where they've actually been able to locate the place and the people the child was saying, but I was before, I was in a place like this and this happened. One story I was involved with was a young boy who was bringing back memories of the island of Barra in Scotland. And so actually the BBC followed up that story. And yeah, thank you very much, Vicky. Yeah, Jim Tucker's book. And so I was asked at one point to participate in a TV program where this boy's memories were being explored live. And he was going to be taken to the place he remembered and so on. So those stories are so convincing because it's one of them of an Indian girl who regretted when she was a little girl having stolen something from a previous family. And she remembered the name of the village, which wasn't that far away. And they actually found that she'd stolen something. She remembered where she'd hidden it. And they went there, and in the place where she said she'd hidden it, they found what she'd stolen. And there are things like this, which are anecdotal, it's not scientific, 10,000 times the same thing proved over and all the rest of it. But they're such amazing stories, they really are, that they are useful for helping this rational and very fixed, skeptical mind that we can grow up with in the West to become looser to give more room, as you said, Katie. So thank you. I think we've got time for one more, if there is anybody.
Can I add a question if no one else does?
Yeah. Hi.
It was a quick question really about you. There's six consciousnesses, but really there's 8. Is the mental consciousness split into 2, or are they 2 separate ones, the number 7 and number 8?
No, they're part of the mental consciousness. So in fact, mental consciousness, if we take it purely numerically, becomes 3 things.
Okay.
And the 3 things aren't 3 separate things. There's mental consciousness globally, but then within it, there are 2 things which are so powerful in making our story what it is, that we pull them out and we give them separate names. They are part of mental consciousness, and not something other, but very, very important parts.
And what was the name of the 7th one?
Defiling. You pick any nasty name you want. Deforming, defiling, corrupting, spoiling. It's Dharma, public enemy, number 1. It's what makes duality where it's not needed. It's what brings your mind again and again into vijnana, a specific focus, rather than letting it relax into what has always been vijnana, the primordial wisdom. And it happens. It happens every single moment of our mind until we reach what is called the 8th bodhisattva level. So our mind gets out of the power of karma at the 1st bodhisattva level. We're no longer forced to be reborn by the ongoing momentum of karma. And there our mind, suddenly the default state of mind becomes Buddha nature. It's the most beautiful moment that will ever happen to any of us. I mean, enlightenment's the end, but you're pretty much prepared for it when the Buddha's enlightenment happens. But the moment of going from the end of your samsaric journey, which has been so many hundreds, thousands of lifetimes, to that flip over into the default, timeless, changeless, wonderful Buddha nature, the beauty that's in all of us. It's the most amazing moment. It's called utmost joy. It's the name of the 1st bodhisattva level. But from there to total enlightenment, you've got another 9 levels. There are 10 bodhisattva levels. It's only at the 8th level, when you are so pure, and your radiance covers hundreds of thousands of beings who are part of you and are helping, that the duality goes. It's only then that it's gone for good. Before that, it's there, we can have it mastered, we're no longer duped by it. So 7th consciousness, which is responsible for this duality, public enemy number 1, is going to be around for a long time. And all of our most skillful Mahamudra method is there as our best friend to help our mind get freer and freer from its power, and in the end, to become free from it. Oh, my bird is telling me it's midday here. It's a nice bird at midday. So maybe we'll finish there. On a very, very nice note. Thank you, everybody. And I hope this was of some use. And I very much look forward to developing this next week. See you soon.
Thank you, Ken.
Go well.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Ken.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.